My name is Elena Cruz, and at 32 years old, I never expected to be sitting in a lawyer's office fighting for my inheritance while still processing the grief of losing my father. The numbness I felt as I stared at my stepmother, Claudia Vega, across the polished oak table was indescribable. Her red lips curved into a smile that made my stomach turn. For 15 years, she had methodically worked to wedge herself between my father and me. And now with Dad gone, that smug expression told me she thought she had won. I should have known something was wrong when she stood up, smoothed her designer black dress, and cleared her throat to make her announcement. Before I continue with what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my father had the last laugh, even from beyond the grave. To understand the magnitude of what happened in that lawyer's office, you need to know about my father, Antonio Delgado Elena Cruz. Dad built his real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single fixer-upper in a rough neighborhood and eventually growing to own one of the most successful property development companies in the state. He was brilliant, hardworking, and genuinely cared about creating homes people would love for generations. His success never changed him, though. He still fixed things around the house himself, insisted on mowing our lawn every Sunday, and taught me how to change a tire before I could even drive. My childhood was everything a kid could dream of. Mom Lucia Herrera was a high school art teacher who filled our home with color and creativity. She balanced Dad's practical nature perfectly. They were that rare couple who still held hands after 20 years of marriage, who still made each other laugh until they cried. Our home was always warm, always full of music and delicious food and friends stopping by just because they wanted to be around us. When I was 17, everything changed. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 6 months she was gone. It was like someone had sucked all the color and music out of our lives. Dad and I were both drowning in grief, barely keeping each other afloat. I still remember the nights I would hear him crying in their bedroom and how in the morning he would put on a brave face for me, making sure I ate breakfast before school. Just over a year after Mom died, Dad met Claudia Vega at a charity gala. She was 20 years his junior, breathtakingly beautiful with long black hair and deep brown eyes that seemed to see right through you. She worked for the charity organizing, donors and events. I will never forget the first time Dad brought her home for dinner. She brought me an expensive bracelet and complimented everything about our house, asking questions about Mom's art on the walls with what seemed like genuine interest. At first, I was happy for Dad. The light had returned to his eyes, and he smiled, more often. When he announced they were getting married after dating for only 4 months, I swallowed my concerns. It felt too soon, too rushed. But who was I to stand in the way of his happiness? I was heading to college soon anyway, and the thought of him being alone in that big house haunted me. The wedding was small, but lavish. I stood beside Dad as his best woman, forcing a smile as Claudia Vega glided down the aisle in a gown that cost more than a semester of my college tuition. Something changed almost immediately after they returned from their honeymoon in Italy. Claudia Vega began redecorating our house, removing Mom's paintings one by one, replacing them with modern impersonal art. When I objected, she smiled tightly and said, "Your father and I want a fresh start, LSE. Surely you can understand that." Dad seemed oblivious to the tension between us at first. He was working more than ever expanding the business into commercial properties, while Claudia Vega took over management of their social calendar. Sunday dinners became elaborate affairs with Dad's business associates, rather than our close friends. Claudia Vega would showcase her gourmet cooking skills and designer outfits, while I sat awkwardly in clothes that never seemed quite fancy enough. By the time I left for college, Claudia Vega had established herself as the lady of the house. Childhood bedroom was converted into her meditation space within weeks. When I came home for holidays, I stayed in the guest room, surrounded by furniture I didn't recognize. Claudia Vega's tactics became more transparent over time. She would forget, to tell me about family gatherings until the last minute. "Oh, LSE, didn't I tell you we were having the Wilsons over tonight? Your father was so disappointed you couldn't make it." She would casually mention to Dad how I never called or visited enough while simultaneously forgetting to pass along my messages to him. Dad sent me money regularly through college and into my early career as a marketing executive. Whenever we spoke on the phone, he seemed distracted, often mentioning he couldn't talk long because Claudia Vega had planned something. Our conversations became shorter, more superficial. The dad, who once spent hours helping me with science projects, now barely had 15 minutes to catch up on my life. I tried to maintain our connection, sending him updates about my work, flying home whenever I could, despite the increasingly chilly welcome from Claudia Vega. She would make comments about my appearance, my career choices, my lack of a serious relationship, all with a sugary smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Luz, darling, that outfit is so practical. I guess that's appropriate for someone in your position, or still single at your age. I was already married to your father. Some women just aren't meant for marriage, I suppose." Dad would occasionally defend me, but weakly, clearly wanting to avoid conflict. "Claudia Vega means well, sweetheart," he would say when we had rare moments alone. "She just wants the best for you." But I could see the strain in his eyes, the way he changed the subject whenever conversation veered too close to any disagreement between his wife and daughter. As years passed, our relationship became increasingly distant. He missed my college graduation because Claudia Vega had planned a surprise anniversary trip. He forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, then overcompensated, with expensive gifts that felt like they were chosen by his assistant. The father who knew every detail of my life, from my favorite ice cream flavor to the names of all my friends, slowly disappeared, replaced by a man who seemed perpetually apologetic and increasingly absent. When I was 28, I landed a job with an international marketing firm that required extensive travel. In some ways, it was a relief. The visits home became even less frequent, reduced to major holidays where Claudia Vega would parade me in front of their friends like evidence of what a wonderful stepmother she was. "We're so close," she would say, arm around my shoulders, fingers digging in just enough to warn me not to contradict her. "Luz is like the daughter I never had." Meanwhile, I built my own life, made my own family of close friends, and tried to accept that the relationship with my father would never be what it once was. I told myself it was normal that adult children drift from their parents. That, at least, he was happy with Claudia Vega. But deep down, I mourned the loss of the man who had been my hero, my rock, my dad. I was in Tokyo closing a major marketing deal for an international client when I got the call that would change everything. It was 3 in the morning, and the unfamiliar number jolted me from sleep. An old family friend, Ricardo Mendoza, was on the line, his voice breaking as he delivered the news no child ever wants to hear. "LSE, I am so sorry to tell you this, but your father passed away last night. Massive heart attack. It was sudden. The doctor said he likely didn't suffer." The words hit me like physical blows. Dad gone. Just like that. No chance to say goodbye, no final words, no closure. The guilt crashed over me in waves as I realized I hadn't spoken to him in over 2 months. 2 months of silence that I could never take back. "Does Claudia Vega know you're calling me?" I asked already, knowing the answer. Ricardo Mendoza hesitated. "Not exactly. She asked me to handle some arrangements, and I thought you should hear it from someone who cares about you. That told me everything I needed to know. Claudia Vega hadn't even planned to inform me of my own father's death. I booked the first flight out of Tokyo, canceling meetings and deadlines without a second thought. 16 hours on a plane with nothing but my grief and regret for company. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from Claudia Vega. Some details about the funeral. Anything. My inbox remained empty except for condolence messages from Ricardo Mendoza and a few family friends who had always stayed loyal despite Claudia Vega's influence. When I finally arrived at my childhood home exhausted and heartbroken, Claudia Vega greeted me with an air kiss and perfectly rehearsed sympathy. She was impeccably dressed in designer black, not a hair out of place, not a trace of redness around. Her eyes. "Luz, darling, what a long journey you've had. You look absolutely dreadful. There's a guest room made up for you upstairs. The funeral is tomorrow at 11 to. I've handled everything. Of course, no hug, no shared grief, no I'm sorry for your loss or he loved you so much. Just logistics and a thinly veiled criticism of my appearance after 20 hours of travel and devastation." The house was filled with flower arrangements and catering preparations. Claudia Vega had transformed my childhood home into a reception venue with alarming efficiency. Mom's remaining photographs had been replaced with large formal portraits of Claudia Vega and Dad from their wedding and various social events. It was as if my mother and by extension my entire childhood had been erased. I barely slept that night lying in an impersonal guest room surrounded by tasteful but cold decor that held not traces of the home I grew up in. I kept expecting Dad to knock on the door to sit on the edge of my bed as he had when I was a child to tell me everything would be okay. The silence was deafening. The funeral was a production that seemed designed to showcase Claudia Vega's grief rather than celebrate Dad's life. She had selected a massive church. Dad had never attended, invited hundreds of business associates he barely knew, and arranged for a string quartet to play music he would have hated. I sat in the front row next to her, feeling like an afterthought, in the commemoration of my own father's life. When it came time for eulogies, Claudia Vega spoke first a tearful performance about their perfect marriage and how she had made his final years the happiest of his life. She didn't mention me once. When it was my turn to speak, I could barely form words through my grief, sharing disjointed memories of the father I had known before, Claudia Vega, the man who taught me to ride a bike and build birdhouses and navigate by the stars. I felt her eyes boring into me the entire time, silently judging every word, every tear. After the service during the reception at the house, I tried to find comfort in reconnecting with old family friends. Many embraced me warmly, sharing stories about Dad that Claudia Vega wouldn't have known. I noticed her watching these interactions from across the room, her smile tightening each time someone spent too long talking with me. When the last guests had left, I asked Claudia Vega if I could have a few of Dad's personal items, his watch, perhaps, or the fishing tackle box we had used on our trips to the lake. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," she said, voice dripping with false regret. "Everything belongs to me now, and I've already made arrangements for his personal effects. The watch is being appraised for insurance purposes, and I've donated those old fishing things. They were just collecting dust." I felt like I had been slapped. She had already disposed of his belongings, erasing more pieces of my father from the world without a thought for what they might mean to me. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. "Those things meant something to us, to Dad and me." "I had every right," she snapped, dropping the grieving widow act for a moment. "I was his wife. I made him happy when you were too busy with your career to visit or call. Don't pretend you care about his things when you barely cared about him." Her words cut deep because they played into my worst fears, my deepest guilt. Had I abandoned Dad? Had I given up too easily? In the face of Claudia Vega's manipulations. As I stood there fighting back tears, Ricardo Mendoza approached us. He had been Dad's friend for over 30 years, long before Claudia Vega entered the picture. "LSE, I need to speak with you privately," he said, ignoring Claudia Vega's obvious displeasure. He led me to Dad's study, one room that seemed untouched by Claudia Vega's redecorating frenzy. It still smelled like him, like leather and the subtle cologne he had worn for as long as I could remember. Ricardo Mendoza closed the door and handed me an envelope. Your father asked me to give you this if anything ever happened to him. He gave it to me about 6 months ago. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in Dad's familiar handwriting, slightly shakier than I remembered. My dearest Luz, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I never found the courage to say these things to you in person. I've made many mistakes in my life, but none greater than allowing distance to grow between us. Claudia Vega, and things haven't been what they seemed. I stayed for complicated reasons, but my love for you never wavered, even when I failed to show it. Trust Andres Villanueva, my love. He has all the information, all the proof. I've prepared everything. Don't give up the fight. Know that I am so proud of the woman you've become, and that I have loved you every second of every day since you came into this world. All my love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Andres Villanueva was Dad's longtime attorney, the man who would be reading the will in a week's time. What fight was Dad talking about? What had he prepared? When I looked up, Ricardo Mendoza was watching me with sad eyes. Your father changed in the last few years, he said quietly. He seemed resigned. But these past 6 months, something was different. He was making calls, having secret meetings. I think he was trying to fix something before it was too late. Fix what I asked. Ricardo Mendoza shook his head. I don't know exactly, but he was worried about you, about what would happen to you after he was gone. He didn't trust Claudia Vega. Not at the end. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my pocket like the treasure it was. Thank you for giving me this. It means more than you know. As I left the study, I saw Claudia Vega watching from the hallway, eyes narrowed with suspicion. What was that about? She demanded just sharing memories. I lied, suddenly understanding that whatever Dad had been planning, Claudia Vega couldn't know about it. Not yet. The week between the funeral and the reading of the will was excruciating. I extended my leave from work and stayed at a hotel nearby, unwilling to accept Claudia Vega's coldly offered guest room for another night. I visited Dad's favorite places, the park where we used to fly kites, the diner where he always ordered the same breakfast for 30 years, the community center where he had volunteered teaching woodworking to kids. Each location held ghosts of happier times, memories that both comforted and devastated me. Claudia Vega made sure I knew exactly what to expect at the will reading. She called daily, her voice syrupy with fake concern. I just want you to be prepared, LSE, she said the night before. We were scheduled to meet with Andres Villanueva. Your father left everything to me, of course. The house, the company, all the accounts. He knew I would manage his legacy properly. How do you know what's in the will? I asked, suspicion growing. Antonio Delgado and I discussed everything, she replied smoothly. We had no secrets. Unlike their relationship he had with you, each conversation was designed to wound, to make me doubt the letter in my possession and the father I thought I knew. Reread his words nightly, clinging to them like a lifeline. Trust Andres Villanueva. Don't give up the fight. I had to believe Dad had a plan, that the letter wasn't just the wishful thinking of a guilty father. On the morning of the will reading, I arrived at Andres Villanueva's office 20 minutes early, hoping for a chance to speak with him privately before Claudia Vega appeared. The receptionist informed me that Andres Villanueva was tied up in another meeting, but would be with us shortly. I sat in the waiting room, smoothing my black dress, nervously watching the door. Claudia Vega arrived exactly on time, naturally, followed by a small entourage of her family members. I barely knew cousins and a sister who had never bothered to build any relationship with me, but suddenly appeared interested in my father's estate. They clustered around Claudia Vega like ladies in waiting, shooting curious glances my way. whispering behind manicured hands. Lou's darling Claudia Vega called across the waiting room loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was just telling my sister how brave you are showing up today when we all know how your father felt about your abandonment. Some people might have been too ashamed." Her family members nodded sympathetically, their expressions a practiced blend of pity and judgment. I gripped my purse tighter, feeling ganged up on and isolated. These people knew nothing about my relationship with Dad. Yet, they had already decided I was the villain in Claudia Vega's carefully constructed narrative. When we were finally ushered into the conference room, Claudia Vega made a show of selecting the chair at the head of the table, arranging her family members around her like a protective barrier. I sat alone on the opposite side, acutely aware of the physical divide that mirrored the emotional one. The conference room was imposing with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that seemed designed to intimidate. Family photos of the law partners lined the walls. Generations of success and stability that made my own fractured family situation feel even more painful by comparison. "Andres Villanueva is running a bit late," his assistant informed us apologetically. "He needed to retrieve some important documents related to Mr. Elena Cruz's estate. He asks for your patience." Claudia Vega immediately began complaining, checking her expensive watch with dramatic sighs. "This is completely unprofessional. I have appointments this afternoon. Antonio Delgado's estate is straightforward. This shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Her sister patted her hand consolingly. "You've been through so much, Claudia Vega. The least they could do is respect your time." I remained silent watching them perform their little play of indignation. I noticed that despite her complaints about the delay, Claudia Vega seemed nervous, repeatedly touching her hair, adjusting her jewelry, glancing at the door. What was she afraid of? Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, Andres Villanueva entered the room. He was a tall man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Dad's attorney for decades, handling both his business and personal legal matters. I had met him several times as a child, but hadn't seen him in years. "My sincere apologies for the delay," he said, placing a leather portfolio on the table. "I needed to ensure all the documents were in order. This is a more complex situation than some of you might be aware." His eyes met mine briefly, and I felt a surge of hope. Was this what Dad had meant? Had Andres Villanueva been part of whatever plan my father had put in place? "Let's not waste any more time," Claudia Vega said sharply. "We all know why we're here." Andres Villanueva nodded, taking his seat at the opposite end of the table from Claudia Vega. "Indeed, we are here to discuss the last will and testament of Antonio Delgado James Elena Cruz." He opened his portfolio and adjusted his glasses. "Before I begin the formal reading, are there any questions?" Before I could speak, Claudia Vega stood up, suddenly smoothing her black dress with manicured hands. Her expression was a perfect blend of grief and dignity, clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Actually, I believe there's something that should be addressed before we proceed," she announced, her voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "As Antonio Delgado's wife of 15 years, I feel it's my duty to prepare everyone for what they're about to hear." Andres Villanueva frowned slightly, but gestured for her to continue. Her family members exchanged knowing glances, clearly prepared for whatever was coming. Antonio Delgado made a significant change to his will approximately 3 months before his untimely passing. Claudia Vega continued, reaching into her designer handbag. "He and I discussed it at length. He was deeply hurt by certain parties' lack of attention and care during his final years." Her eyes fixed on me, making it abundantly clear who I meant. Miss Domack clenched with dread as she withdrew a document from her bag. In this amendment, Antonio Delgado specifically removed LSE from his will entirely. Her voice dripped with satisfaction as shocked murmurs rippled through her family members. He felt that someone who couldn't make time for him in life didn't deserve to benefit from his death. I tried to change his mind, of course, being the compassionate person I am, but Antonio Delgado was quite adamant. She placed the document on the table and slid it toward Andres Villanueva, her eyes never leaving my face, clearly savoring my shock and pain. I thought it would be kinder to address this now rather than have poor LSE hear it during the formal reading. No one should be blindsided by such news. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. Claudia Vega's family looked at me with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. I felt sick, dizzy with disbelief. Could Dad really have cut me out completely? Had his letter been nothing but empty words? Or was Claudia Vega presenting a forged document to pressure me into giving up before the real will was read? I looked to Andres Villanueva, desperately, searching his face for some hint, some reassurance that my father hadn't betrayed me so completely. Andres Villanueva picked up the document Claudia Vega had presented, examining it with professional detachment. The silence in the room was suffocating as everyone waited for his verdict. I could barely breathe, my heart pounding so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. This appears to be an amendment to Antonio Delgado's will, Andres. Villanueva confirmed, and my heart sank. Dated February 15th of this year, approximately 3 months before his passing. Claudia Vega's smile widened triumph gleaming in her eyes. Antonio Delgado was very clear about his wishes. He felt that LSE had abandoned him during his time of need, choosing her career over family. As painful as it is to say he wanted to make a statement with his final wishes, her family members nodded solemnly as if they had any right to judge the relationship between me and my father. I felt tears threatening but refused to give Claudia Vega the satisfaction of seeing me break down. "Is this real?" I asked Andres Villanueva directly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did my father really do this?" Andres Villanueva looked at me over his glasses, his expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's shock, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. A small chuckle escaped him as he continued to examine the document. "Is something amusing?" Andres Villanueva Claudia Vega asked sharply, her confident smile faltering slightly. Andres Villanueva's chuckle grew into full laughter, startling everyone in the room. He placed the document back on that bowl and removed his glasses, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. "I apologize," he said, regaining his composure. "But this document is quite possibly the most amateur attempt at forgery I've seen in my 40 years of legal practice." The blood drained from Claudia Vega's face. "What are you talking about? That amendment is perfectly legal. Antonio Delgado signed it in front of witnesses." "Did he now?" Andres Villanueva asked, his tone suddenly steely despite his lingering smile. "That's fascinating considering Antonio Delgado was in the hospital for gallbladder surgery on February 15th. I visited him there myself. He was under heavy sedation and certainly in no condition to be amending legal documents." Claudia Vega's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her family members shifted uncomfortably suddenly, very interested in their shoes or the ceiling, tiles. Furthermore, Andres Villanueva continued, "This signature bears little resemblance to Antonio Delgado's. The notary stamp is for someone whose license expired 3 years ago, and perhaps most damning of all, it references properties Antonio Delgado sold in 2019 as if he still owned them." He shook his head almost admiringly. "If you're going to forge a legal document, Mrs. Elena Cruz, at least do your homework." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Claudia Vega's sister grabbed her arm, whispering urgently in her ear. Claudia Vega shook her off her face, contorted with anger and embarrassment. "This is absurd," she hissed. "Antonio Delgado told me specifically he was changing the will. He promised me everything, everything." Andres Villanueva ignored her outburst and retrieved a thick document from his portfolio. "Now, if we may proceed." with the reading of the actual will, the one Antonio Delgado signed and had properly witnessed and notarized 4 months ago. He cleared his throat and began to read. I, Antonio Delgado James Elena Cruz, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. The legal preamble seemed endless as I sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Claudia Vega had attempted to present a forged amendment to cut me out of Dad's will. She had lied boldly and publicly, which meant Dad hadn't betrayed me after all. Finally, Andres Villanueva reached the meat of the will. To my beloved daughter, LSE Maria Elena Cruz, I leave 70% of my estate, including but not limited to my controlling interest in Elena Cruz Properties, Inc., the family home at 420 Oak Lane, all associated furnishings and personal items therein, with exceptions as noted below, and 70% of all financial accounts, investments, and insurance policies. I gasped audibly. 70%. I had expected perhaps a token inheritance, something Claudia Vega couldn't legally prevent. But this was the majority of Dad's considerable estate. To my wife, Claudia Vega Elise Elena Cruz, I leave 30% of my estate, including the vacation property in Palm Springs, her personal vehicle, all jewelry purchased during our marriage, and 30% of financial accounts, investments, insurance policies. Claudia Vega's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is impossible," she sputtered. "He would never do this to me. Never." Andres Villanueva continued as if she hadn't spoken. I make these distributions with full knowledge and awareness of events that have transpired in my marriage and family life. For the record, I wish to state that I have come to believe that my wife Claudia Vega married me primarily for financial gain and has systematically attempted to alienate me from my daughter LSE through manipulation, lies, and interference with our communications. The room fell completely silent. Even Claudia Vega seemed stunned into speechlessness. I have collected evidence of this behavior over the past 2 years, including recorded conversations between Claudia Vega and her attorney, discussing plans to alter my will after my death, emails, and text messages in which she deliberately failed to relay messages between myself and my daughter, and witnessed statements from household staff regarding her statements and actions. My mind was reeling. Dad had known all this time. He had known what Claudia Vega was doing. Why hadn't he confronted her? Why hadn't he divorced her? Why hadn't he told me? As if answering my unspoken questions, Andres Villanueva continued reading. I chose not to confront Claudia Vega with this knowledge for several reasons. First, my doctor informed me 2 years ago that I had a heart condition that could significantly shorten my life. I feared that the stress of divorce proceedings might trigger a fatal episode before I could ensure Luz's inheritance was protected. Second, I believed that Claudia Vega would attempt to destroy evidence or create false narratives if she knew I was aware of her manipulations. By maintaining the appearance of ignorance, I was able to gather conclusive proof of her actions and intentions. Tears streamed down my face freely now. Dad had been protecting me all along, working silently to ensure Claudia Vega couldn't steal my inheritance or completely sever our relationship. He had sacrificed his own happiness and peace of mind for my future security. I deeply regret the pain my silence has caused. My daughter Andres Villanueva read his voice softening. LSE, if you are hearing this, please know that I never stopped loving you. Every missed call, every canceled visit broke my heart. I kept every message you sent, every photo of your achievements. I was always so proud of you. Even when. This is Gregory Barnes, the private investigator your father hired 2 years ago when he first became suspicious of Claudia Vega's behavior. Gregory nodded to me. Miss Elena Cruz, my condolences on your loss. Your father was a good man. What is this? Claudia Vega demanded, looking increasingly cornered. Insurance. Andres Villanueva explained. Antonio Delgado wanted to make absolutely certain that this wishes would be respected. Gregory has compiled a comprehensive report documenting not only your interference in Antonio Delgado's relationship with LSE, but also some other concerning behaviors. Gregory opened a thin folder. Mrs. Elena Cruz, would you like me to detail my findings regarding your relationship with Joseph Mercer? The numerous hotel meetings, the joint bank account, the property purchased together in the Cayman Islands, the color drained from Claudia Vega's face. You had me followed. Antonio Delgado suspected you were unfaithful, Gregory said matter-of-factly. I confirmed his suspicions with substantial evidence. He chose not to confront you for reasons she explained in his will. I felt sick. Not only had Claudia Vega manipulated and desolated my father, but she had betrayed him with another man, all while maintaining the facade of the devoted wife. You have 24 hours to decide, Claudia Vega, I said, gathering my strength. Accept the terms of the will or face the consequences of full disclosure. Your choice. For the first time since I'd known her, Claudia Vega appeared genuinely defeated. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her, and she had no more cards to play. This isn't over, she said. But the threat sounded hollow even to her own ears. She gathered her belongings and stormed out of the conference room, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Andres Villanueva looked at me with newfound respect. Your father would be proud of how you handled that. He worried you might be too kind-hearted to stand up to her if it came to this. I'm not the same naive girl she manipulated all those years, I said, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline drained away. And I won't let her take the last gift my father wanted to give me, his final effort to make things right between us. As I sat, there processing everything that had happened, I realized that while I had lost my father, I had reclaimed the truth of our relationship. He had never stopped loving me. He had never chosen Claudia Vega over me, and in his final act, he had ensured that I would know exactly how much I had meant to him, even when we were apart. The days following the will reading were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Andres Villanueva provided me with access to all the evidence Dad had collected, and each new piece of information was both vindicating and heartbreaking. I spent hours reading through intercepted emails I had sent to Dad that he never received, listening to phone messages that Claudia Vega had deleted before he could hear them, and examining the meticulous notes Dad had kept documenting his growing suspicions. Why didn't he just divorce her? I asked Andres Villanueva during one of our many meetings to transfer assets and handle legal paperwork. Once he knew what she was doing, why stay in such a toxic marriage? Andres Villanueva sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. Your father confided in me about this. There were several factors. His heart condition was very real, and his doctor had warned that extreme stress could trigger a fatal episode. A contentious divorce from someone as vindictive as Claudia Vega would certainly qualify as extreme stress. He risked his happiness to preserve his health, I murmured, the irony not lost on me. There was more to it. Andres Villanueva continued, Antonio. Delgado felt responsible for Claudia Vega in some ways. He told me once that he believed he had rushed into marriage with her while still grieving your mother. That perhaps he had used Claudia Vega as a distraction from his pain. He felt that gave him a certain obligation to her despite her behavior. That sounds like Dad, I said with Assad's smile, always taking responsibility even for others' actions. And finally, Andres Villanueva added gently. He was afraid of losing his connection to you completely. Claudia Vega had convinced him for years that you were distant by choice, too busy with your own life to care about him. He feared that if he divorced her and the truth came out about how she had manipulated both of you, you might never forgive him for being so blind, for allowing her to damage your relationship. It was only in the last 2 years as he gathered evidence that he began to understand the full extent of her interference. The thought of Dad suffering silently, torn between his health concerns, his misplaced sense of obligation to Claudia Vega, and his fear of losing me forever was almost unbearable. He had been trapped in a prison of Claudia Vega's making with walls reinforced by his own sense of duty and fear. "Did he suffer, Andres Villanueva?" I asked, needing to know. "In his marriage? Was he unhappy all those years?" Andres Villanueva considered this carefully. "Not all the time, I don't think. In the early years before he became suspicious, there were periods of contentment. Antonio Delgado was skilled at finding joy where he could. But in these last few years, once he began to see Claudia Vega clearly, yes, I believe he suffered greatly. The knowledge that she had systematically destroyed his relationship with you weighed on him enormously. This painful truth settled over me like a physical weight. Dad had endured years of quiet misery, all while meticulously building a case to ensure that Claudia Vega couldn't continue her manipulation after his death. His final act of love had been to protect me from her greed and malice, even when he no longer could. As I went through Dad's personal effects in the house that was now legally mine, I discovered a locked drawer in his study desk. Andres Villanueva provided the key, explaining that Dad had given it to him with instructions to pass it to me after the will was settled. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to me in Dad's handwriting spanning the 15 years of his marriage to Claudia Vega. Letters he had written but never sent. Some were responses to major life events, congratulating me on job promotions or expressing concern during challenging times. Others were simply updates on his life, things he wished he could tell me during our increasingly rare and strained phone calls. All of them expressed his unwavering love and pride in me. One letter dated shortly after I'd moved abroad for work hit me particularly hard. "My dearest LSE, I heard about your international promotion today. Not from you, which breaks my heart, but from Ricardo Mendoza, who saw the announcement in the business section. I wonder if you tried to tell me and somehow I missed your call, or if you've simply given up trying to share your life with me. Either possibility fills me with sadness. I am so incredibly proud of you, my brilliant girl. You've built a career more impressive than I could have imagined, all through your own talent and determination. Your mother would be bursting with pride if she could see you now. I miss you more than words can express. The house feels empty without your visits, without your laughter. I find myself walking past your old room now, Claudia Vega's meditation space, and remembering how you used to sit at the window seat reading for hours. Something isn't right in my life, LSE. I can't quite put my finger on what's changed, but I feel increasingly isolated. Claudia Vega says you're too busy for family now that adult children naturally drift away from their parents. Perhaps she's right. But the father in me refuses to believe we could have lost our bond so completely in such a short time. I will keep this letter with the others. Perhaps someday you'll read them and understand that not a day went by when I didn't think of you, miss you, love you. All my love always, Dad. I sobbed as I read each letter, mourning the years we had lost to Claudia Vega's manipulation, the relationship that had been stolen from us. But alongside the grief was a profound sense of healing. Dad had never stopped loving me. He had never been disappointed in me or felt abandoned by me. The doubts that had plagued me for years were finally laid to rest. 24 hours after the will reading, Andres Villanueva received word from Claudia Vega's new attorney. She would accept the terms of the will without contest in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement, preventing the public release of any evidence Antonio Delgado had collected. I agreed immediately. Despite everything she had done, dragging Claudia, Vega's sins into the public eye would not bring Dad back or heal our lost years. When I met with her to sign the final paperwork, Claudia Vega was a shadow of her former confident self. She avoided my eyes as we sat across from each other in Andres Villanueva's office, signing document after document to formalize our agreement. As she rose to leave, I finally spoke directly to her. I need to understand something, Claudia Vega. Was any of it real? Did you ever love my father at all? She paused, her hand on the door knob back still turned to me. For a moment, I thought she would leave without answering. "I loved the life he gave me," she finally said, voice barely above a whisper. The status, the security, the respect that came with being Mrs. Antonio Delgado Elena Cruz. Was that love I don't know anymore? She left without another word, walking out of my life as suddenly as she had entered it 15 years earlier. I never saw her again. According to Andres Villanueva, she sold the Palm Springs house, liquidated her portion of the assets, and moved abroad. Sometimes I wonder if she found whatever it was she had been so desperately seeking in her marriage to Dad, the thing that drove her to such manipulative extremes. Mostly, though, I focus on rebuilding my own life. In the weeks that followed, I met with Dad's business associates, learning about the company he had built and making plans for its future. Many of them shared stories about Dad. I had never heard moments of generosity and integrity that had gone unmentioned. Several admitted that they had noticed the change in him over the years of his marriage to Claudia Vega, how he had become more withdrawn, less like the vibrant man they had known. "He lit up whenever he mentioned you, though," his vice president told me over coffee. "Even in recent years when he thought you were drifting apart, just saying your name brought a smile to his face." Slowly, I began to piece together a more complete picture of my father's life during our years of separation. The man who had maintained his love for my mother despite remarrying. The businessman who had never compromised his ethics despite pressure from Claudia Vega to cut corners for greater profits. The father who had sacrificed his own happiness to protect his daughter's future. I also discovered through conversations with household staff who had been too afraid of Claudia Vega to speak up while Dad was alive, just how many times I had allegedly canceled visits at the last minute or declined invitations to family events, none of which I had ever actually received. The web of lies Claudia Vega had spun was more extensive than even Dad had uncovered. "Your father suspected something wasn't right, Elena," the longtime housekeeper told me tearfully. "He would ask me sometimes if I had seen any messages from you, if perhaps you had called when he was out." I was too afraid of Mrs. Elena Cruz to tell him the truth that I had seen her delete your messages from his phone. That I had heard her tell you he was too busy to speak when he was sitting right in the next room asking who was calling. "I am so sorry, Miss LSE. I should have been braver. I couldn't bring myself to blame Elena or any of the other staff." Claudia Vega had wielded her power in the household with an iron fist, and their livelihoods had depended on her goodwill. Instead, I focused on moving forward on honoring Dad's memory by preserving the best parts of his legacy. Months after that fateful day in the lawyer's office, I stood at the window of what had once been Dad's study and was now mine. The room had been transformed. The cold, impersonal decor Claudia Vega had imposed, replaced with warm colors and comfortable furnishings that reminded me of our family home before Mom died. Photos of both my parents no hung on the walls, no longer hidden away in drawers or relegated to storage. Elena Cruz Properties was thriving under my leadership with guidance from Dad's trusted executives and my own marketing expertise. I had implemented several initiatives Dad had outlined in his notes but never pursued, including an affordable housing division that created homes for lower-income families without sacrificing quality or design. The most meaningful project, however, was the Antonio Delgado and Lucia Herrera Elena Cruz Foundation, established with a significant portion of my inheritance. The foundation provided scholarships for children who'd lost parents, funded grief counseling programs, and supported research into early detection of heart disease. It was my way of ensuring that my parents' legacy would touch lives far beyond our immediate circle, that the love they had shared would continue to create positive change in the world. The process of healing from the years of separation and manipulation had not been easy. I had worked with a therapist to process my complicated grief, the anger at Claudia Vega, the sadness for lost time with Dad, and the guilt I still sometimes felt for not somehow breaking through the barriers she had created. Rationally, I knew there was nothing more I could have done. But emotions rarely follow rational paths. In Dad's desk, I had found his journal from the last 2 years of his life, documenting his growing awareness of Claudia Vega's manipulations and his careful plans to protect me. One entry particularly stood out. I realized today that I have been a coward. I have allowed fear to dictate me actions, fear of confrontation, fear for my health, fear of losing Luz completely if she knew how badly I had failed her as a father. But there is a different kind of courage than direct confrontation. There is the courage to plan, to be patient, to lay groundwork that may not bear fruit until after I'm gone. This is the courage I must find now for Luz's sake. I may not have the time or strength to repair our relationship in life, but I can ensure that she knows the truth after I'm gone, that she receives the inheritance that is rightfully hers. That Claudia Vega cannot continue to harm her once I am no longer here to serve as a buffer. This will be my final act of love as her father. Those words had brought me both comfort and sorrow. Comfort in knowing that Dad had never stopped fighting for me in his own quiet way. Sorrow that he had felt so trapped, so limited in his options, to reach out to me directly. The most difficult lesson I had to learn was forgiveness. Not of Claudia Vega, whom I may never truly forgive, but of myself and my father. I had to forgive myself for the doubts I had harbored the times I'd given up trying to reach Dad, assuming he simply didn't prioritize our relationship, and I had to forgive Dad for not finding a way to break free of Claudia Vega's influence sooner for the years we had lost that could never be reclaimed. That forgiveness came gradually as I immersed myself in Dad's letters and journals. As I spoke with people who had known him during those years, as I came to understand the impossible situation he had found himself in. He had made mistakes, certainly, but he had done the best he could with the knowledge and strength he possessed at the time. And in the end, he had found a way to make things right, even if he didn't live to see their salts. As I sorted through the last of Dad's personal items, one evening I came across a small wooden box I had never seen before. Inside was Mom's wedding ring, which I had assumed was buried with her, and a note in Dad's handwriting. For Luz when the time is right. Your mother wanted you to have this to remember that true love persists beyond separation, beyond even death. I have kept it safe all these years, our reminder of what real partnership looks like. May you find someone who loves you as completely as your mother and I loved each other. Someone who brings light to your life as you brought light to ours from the moment you were born. Tears blurred my vision as I slipped the ring onto my finger. It was too big, but I would have it resized. For now, I simply needed to feel that connection to both of them, to the love that had created and shaped me. The most profound lesson I took from this painful journey was about the nature of love itself. True love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the careful planning of a father trying to protect his child's future. It doesn't always fight, openly. Sometimes it works quietly behind the scenes, gathering evidence, building safeguards. Love persists even when communication fails, even when years pass without proper connection, even when manipulative forces try to sever its bonds. Dad's love had survived 15 years of Claudia Vega's systematic attempts to destroy it. It had survived misunderstandings, distance, and doubt. It had found a way to reach me even after his death to tell me everything he had been unable to express in life. And my love for him had survived too, through all the hurt and confusion, the missed calls, and declined invitations that never actually occurred. Deep down, I had never stopped being that little girl who thought her dad hung the moon and stars, who trusted in his love, even when all evidence seemed to point to its absence. No will, no legal document could ever fully capture the true inheritance. My father left me. The knowledge that I was loved unconditionally, that I was worth fighting for, that no manipulation or deceit could ultimately sever the bond between parent and child, if that love was genuine. As I sit here in his study, surrounded by the evidence of both his life and his love, I feel his presence more strongly than I have since he died. not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the enduring impact of his character on my own, the values he instilled that helped me stand up to Claudia Vega. The strength he nurtured that allows me to carry on his legacy while building own. No inheritance of money or property could ever match the true gift he gave me. The certainty that I was loved always, even when that love was obscured by the machinations of someone who could never understand its power or depth. Have you ever experienced someone trying to come between you and a loved one? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more tales of family betrayal and ultimate redemption. Share this with someone who might be struggling with family relationships. To remind them that sometimes love works in ways we can't immediately see. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, no manipulator can truly destroy love that's built on a foundation of truth and genuine connection.